Welcome to the Unity of Olympia podcast.
I've been thinking a lot about the 4 agreements recently. Most of you will remember the book by Don Miguel Ruiz. It was published in the year 2000. 1, be impeccable with your word. 2, don't take anything personally. 3, don't make assumptions. And 4, always do your best. You know, the story of Joseph is one that exemplifies the 4 agreements. I don't know how a 17-year-old figures that out since I'm still working on it. But for me, these are frequently done, these 4 agreements I can keep in hindsight. And for now, that is my best. That sometimes I behave in ways that I go back, look back at the end of the day and go, I wish I'd done that differently. And one of the things that I like to do is think about, well, how would I do that differently? How could I be with that experience and do it? Because I believe the science that says that if I practice in my brain, that will give me a better chance of actually doing it different the next time. And when I recognize that I'm doing my best, and that God is working in and through me, that's my opportunity for release, for letting go of any guilt or shame. The story of Joseph is one of tragedy and overcoming. Today's lesson is about release. It's about forgiveness. To harbor resentment without forgiveness is like taking a poison and thinking the other person is going to get sick. I know that you've all heard that before. And yet it is a challenge to release the I'm right, you're wrong, how dare you do me wrong. But when we do, when we forgive another, we give forth love for harm done to us. That's what Charles Fillmore wrote about forgiveness, that it is to give forth love in exchange for harm done to us. It's to turn on the light when we've been living in darkness. And it's to gain freedom when we've been living in prison. Today, the main message is an affirmation. I told you last week that I would make the affirmation easier this week. I didn't really. What I did was I cut it into 2 parts. So listen closely, because this is a call and respond. You get to respond with exactly what I say. I deny darkness has any power to keep me from my good. I deny darkness has any power to keep me from my good. The Christ within is my source of freedom. The Christ within is my source of freedom. So I want to give a little lesson in how to let go of resentments, and this is something that I get from the 12-step program. It's about honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. The first letter in how is H, and it's about being honest about what our real experience is, our interior experience, what our real thoughts are. And most of us have been trained up in some way or another to put them aside because they're not pretty. But you know what happens when we put aside the thoughts that we have and don't look at them directly. They go underground. They don't actually go away. They go underground, and then they show up in ways that make you look back at the end of the day and go, I wish I'd done that differently, right? So that's the first thing, is to be able to take a look at our own thoughts and feelings honestly. Because, you know, these things, negativity, fear, projection of our own history, they not only affect our relationships with other people, they affect our bodies. They affect our health and well-being personally as well. So, these keep us from real freedom. For me, that's why it's partially important to have somebody else to talk to about stuff so that I can get a perspective that I don't already have. Which takes us to the next one, the next letter in the word how, and that's open-minded. Honest, open-minded. Open-minded to hear another perspective, to try on another perspective of what the experience is. To imagine even that there might be good outcomes. I mentioned last week that I'm taking a 8-week class in positive intelligence. One of the things the teacher has mentioned in his book, Positive Intelligence, is that when something happens that you consider to be bad, go ahead and take some time to imagine 3 positive outcomes that could come from it. Just do it. Just imagine it as fully as possible, and you do have the power of imagination. It lives within you. So make it up. Make it as extravagant as you want. This is about being open to something that allows us to shift our way of being on the inside. Which brings us to the last one, W, H-O-W, honest, open-minded, willing. Just coming to an understanding of what's going on in our minds and hearts, and just being open-minded enough to see that something else might come from this that would be good is not enough. We have to be willing to be changed. Willing to be changed allows us to actually live into a different experience of the world. We say that our third basic principle is that thoughts that are held in mind produce after their kind. That the way that we see the world is because of the way that we think of the world. It's through our lens. But in order to shift that, we have to be willing to actually change our lens. Freedom from resentment and fear can be brought about through our own willingness to see things differently, to be different. These are the keys to be honest, open-minded, and willing. These are keys that turn on the light of release, of letting go, and of forgiveness. I deny the darkness has any power to keep me from my good. Together, I deny the darkness has any power to keep me from my good. The Christ within is my source of freedom. The Christ within is my source of freedom. In unity, we honor all faith traditions and all paths to God, but I don't know of another spiritual tradition or teacher that talks as much about forgiveness as Jesus. And I don't know all of the other traditions as well as I know this one, but forgiveness is a big deal, right? So I want to read from Matthew, and this comes from the Message version of the Bible, chapter 5. It's from the Sermon on the Mount. You're familiar with the old written law, love your friend, and its unwritten companion, hate your enemy. I'm challenging that. I'm telling you, love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the supple moves of prayer. For then you are working out of your true self, your God-created selves. This is what God does. He gives his best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone regardless, the good, the bad, the nice, and the nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner can do that. So for me, my question is, who are my enemies? And I would suggest that an enemy is anything or anyone that keeps you from being the love of God that is the truth of who you are. So it's an idea, it's an experience that you've taken in as bad, anything that keeps, it's maybe your body, if you have an illness in your body and you think it's bad, if it's keeping you from being the love of God, that is an enemy. Now I know that's tough for a lot of people in Unity. I see. It's like, ugh. Okay. But it's about redefining. I know enemy carries a lot of religious baggage. Sin carries a lot of religious baggage. So let's just take a look at it in a way that is not necessarily about some religion making you bad and wrong, but as a definition, using enemy as in the definition that allows you to just be awake to it. Just seeing it. Oh, I have a couple of conditions, bodily conditions, that sometimes get me. And sometimes I think it's the enemy. And what I know is that carrying that consciousness in my mind actually makes those conditions worse in my body. And so when I can be aware of it, when I can look for it, then I can shift. But if I can't look for it, if I can't see that it's there because I'm so afraid of having an enemy, then I don't have an opportunity to shift. This is even true about being dumped in a hole in the ground, about being sold into slavery and then wrongly imprisoned. Even then, we can take a look and say, what good can come from this? Michael Fox was enjoying an extraordinary career as a movie star when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 30. 30. He subsequently became an advocate for finding a cure and founded the Michael J. Fox Foundation in 2000, the year 2000, to help fund research, and he didn't quit acting either. Christopher Reeve was Superman 4 movies in a row. Then he was paralyzed from the neck down in 1995 when he was thrown from a horse. He continued to work. He directed films and lobbied for spinal injury research and advocated for better insurance for all people with disabilities. There is good that comes if we're willing to let it work through us. People have tragedies that show up as enemies, and we can show up as the light of God anyway. Here's the rest of that chapter from Matthew. I love the Message Bible, just as a reminder. In a word, what I'm saying is grow up. I could just see Jesus saying that. Grow up. You are kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously toward others, the way God lives in you. I deny darkness has any power to keep me from my good. Together, I deny darkness has any power to keep me from my good. Ooh, the Christ within is my source of freedom. The Christ within is my source of freedom. This year I've been focusing my lessons on this book, Discover the Power Within You by Eric Butterworth. He wrote it 50 years ago or so. I didn't look it up, sorry. And it is an extraordinary book that uses the teachings of Jesus over and over again to talk about how and why Jesus was telling us that we are the Christ, just the same as he is the Christ. That's our role in the world, is to live that out. And not later, but now. We have this idea that we won't become the Christ until we forgive, that we won't become the Christ until we act right, that we're not it. But the Christ that we are is our path of forgiveness. We don't get to be one with God and all of creation when we stop making mistakes, when we stop hurting each other. We heal those hurts through the love of the Christ that is already within us. You've heard me use other terms for this, and so if you're one of those that is going, "Ugh, Christ, ugh, Christ." Buddha nature, highest self. Last week I introduced the term the sage, the wise one within. Just like God has lots of different names, it exists regardless of what you call it. Because I'm using Jesus stories today, I'm going to call it the Christ within. The power to overcome darkness and claim lives of freedom and joy lies in knowing that you are already gifted with this power, this presence. It is already present. So that's what we're about. That's what unity is about. That's what unity of Olympia is about. It's the power to be present in the darkness, knowing that there is light, bringing the light yourself. Just like Joseph. So you might say, but the election. Or maybe you're one of those that's really happy about the election. And please remember, there may be people in this room who are very, very pleased with the election. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. What we do know, it's our responsibility to dig in, find that Christ nature, and be the love and the light that we've been called to be. I have a dream. And I think of Martin Luther King Jr., and I just, he's right up there next to Jesus for me. I'm not kidding. I have a dream that all of the states of our great nation will one day have the same freedoms and honor all people the way that we do in our great state. Yes? And even greater than these liberties, I long to see the day when our entire nation cares for the refugee from war and famine. I long to see the day when the poorest among us eats well and lives in a house. I deeply crave the world that honors people regardless of their identity on whatever spectrum you're talking about. I refuse to let go of these dreams, and I think you do too, because I am the Christ, and so are you. I am the Christ. Together, I am the Christ. I am one with God. It's only in holding on to this dream that it will ever be a reality. If we let go of the dream and dissolve into despair, it will never become real. It is our job to hold on to it, to live it to the best of our own abilities. I was listening to NPR and I heard a story about a place in the Smoky Mountains where there's no city lights. And there's this forest and there's field and the people who live there, it's just, of course, made on NPR, so now everybody knows, where people who live there have gone for generations to watch the fireflies. And the fireflies start in the forest up the hill. And then pretty soon, they're all lighting up all across the field. And she says thousands and thousands of fireflies. And that eventually, they all light up in unison. On, off, on, off, on. It's magic, right? One world, one consciousness. It is magic. In the dark, infinite possibilities exist. Even if the world around us is dark, we turn on the light to see possibility. We turn on the light within us to live into the truth of who and what we are. Extraordinary and powerful. I deny darkness has any power to keep me from my good. Together, I deny darkness has any power to keep me from my good. The Christ within is my source of freedom. Together, the Christ within is my source of freedom. You know, we practice releasing resentments and fear through honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And that's doing the inside work. We believe the teacher who says that each of us is already whole and holy. We are as much the Christ as Jesus. Even in the dark, we affirm the infinite possibilities, even the possibility of magic and miracles. God bless you.